Have you ever wondered what it truly means to grow old without the support of family? Imagine facing the challenges of aging alone, without children, a spouse, or close relatives to lean on. In today's video, we're diving deep into the pressing issue of elder orphans, a growing phenomenon that affects thousands of individuals every year. Why should you watch until the end? Because understanding elder orphans is not just about recognizing a societal trend. It's about empathy, awareness, and actionable steps we can all take to support those who might one day find themselves in this vulnerable position. You'll discover the emotional and financial struggles elder orphans endure, learn about the societal changes contributing to this trend, and explore practical ways you can make a difference in your community. Whether you're approaching your later years, have loved ones who might be at risk, or simply want to be more informed, this video provides essential insights and practical advice to help ensure that no one has to navigate their twilight years in isolation. Stay with us to uncover the realities of elder orphans and find out how you can contribute to a more supportive and connected society. Don't miss out on this crucial conversation. Your awareness and actions can make a meaningful difference in the lives of many. Let's explore this important topic together and take steps toward a more compassionate future. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. Being an elder orphan is a deeply emotional and unsettling experience that transcends the mere loss of parents. Of course, the death of one's parents is an undeniable part of it, but there's so much more to this reality than that. It's about the overwhelming sense of being completely without family. No spouse to turn to, no children to care for you, no close relatives to offer you any support, whether that be emotional, physical, or financial. As you get older, you're left to navigate the inevitable challenges of aging completely alone. There may still be friends or social acquaintances in your life, but these are often not the deep, unwavering connections that family can offer. The people who know you, who you've shared years of experiences and memories with, are gone, or perhaps never existed in the first place. You realize that as you age, you're not just dealing with the physical changes of getting older, but with the profound and emotional weight of lacking that fundamental support system. The very safety net that is supposed to be there as you face life's most vulnerable years. The truth is that being an elder orphan is not a new phenomenon, but what's deeply troubling is how much more common it's becoming, especially in recent years. This is something that has always existed to some extent, but I've been seeing a growing number of articles, studies, and experts increasingly addressing the issue. It's as though the world is waking up to a crisis we've ignored for too long. And yet, despite the growing awareness, it breaks my heart to realize that society, particularly here in the United States, is woefully unprepared for this growing reality. Our social safety nets are thin, our infrastructure is not designed to support those of us aging alone, and it feels like the world is leaving us behind. The lack of government support, the difficulty of accessing healthcare, and the overwhelming sense of isolation all compound to create a crisis that we are just beginning to fully comprehend. It's truly devastating to think about. As I get older, I feel the weight of this situation more keenly than ever before. It's not just a personal concern, it's a societal one that is only going to get worse as time goes on. Let me give you a glimpse into my reality. I currently live in low-income senior housing, and I'm immensely grateful for it because it's affordable, and it provides me with a place to call home. But when I allow myself to think beyond the present moment, I'm filled with a sense of unease and fear about the future. What happens if my health begins to decline? What happens if I need more care than I can provide for myself? The painful truth is that I wouldn't be able to afford assisted living or any kind of care that goes beyond the basics. It's a fear that gnaws at me every day. If my health takes a turn for the worse, I would end up in a nursing home. My social security check would go straight to the facility, and I would be left with nothing but the bare minimum. Sure, they'll take care of my physical needs, feeding me, making sure I take my medication, But that's not the life I want for myself in my final years. I want more than that. I want to feel seen, heard, loved, and cared for in a way that nourishes my spirit, not just my body. And I know I'm not alone in feeling this way. The reality is that most people my age, I'm 69, are not prepared for what lies ahead. They, too, are facing the harsh truth that they haven't made plans for when they can no longer take care of themselves. And it's deeply upsetting to think about. Many of us haven't saved enough, haven't thought ahead, or simply didn't foresee the emotional and physical toll aging would take on us. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. According to the AARP, about 12% of the population aged 50 and over are considered elder orphans. Let that sink in, 12%. That's a huge number when you think about it. 12% of the population faces the unique struggles of aging without the support of children or immediate family. And this percentage is growing as people live longer and as family structures continue to fracture. More and more people are finding themselves in this painful position, and it's heart-wrenching. But here's where it gets even more upsetting. Even those who have children aren't necessarily exempt from becoming elder orphans. Estrangement, emotional distance, or complicated family dynamics can create the same sense of isolation and abandonment, even if you technically have biological family members out there somewhere. It's devastating to think that even the very people you may have once counted on could be out of reach, leaving you to face your final years alone. The sadness that comes with this reality is almost too much to bear. What's even more troubling is that we're living in a society that simply isn't prepared for this shift. There is so little support for those of us aging without family, and the services and resources available are often either inaccessible or insufficient. As more people like me, people who are growing older and lack a family safety net, find themselves in this position, we're faced with a future that feels overwhelmingly bleak. We're left to wonder how we'll survive, how we'll get by when our health fails us, and how we'll keep our spirits intact in the face of loneliness. It's a terrifying thought, and it's a reality that's all too real for so many of us. The growing number of elder orphans, coupled with the lack of resources and support, fills me with a sense of urgency. We need to start having these conversations more openly. We need to acknowledge the reality that so many of us will be facing, and we need to demand better from our society. We can't continue to ignore the fact that a large portion of the population is aging without a family and that this demographic is only going to grow. The time for change is now. We can't keep sweeping this issue under the rug, pretending that it doesn't exist. The emotional cost of ignoring this problem is simply too high. If we don't start making real changes to how we care for our aging population, then we are failing not only the current generation of elder orphans, but those who will inevitably find themselves in the same position down the road. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to raise awareness about this issue, to advocate for those of us who have no one left, and to ensure that future generations of elder orphans don't have to face the same devastating isolation that so many of us do. This is something that needs to be addressed with urgency and compassion. We cannot afford to wait any longer. The future of so many of us depends on it. This is all so radically different from the world I once knew and grew up in. As I reflect on how much things have changed, my mind always drifts back to my mother's time. The years when she endured the crushing weight of the Great Depression and then emerged into the uncertain but hopeful times of the 1940s. Life back then was difficult, yes, full of struggles, sacrifices, and the kind of hardships that seem almost unimaginable to us now. But it was also filled with a sense of community, a sense of familial duty that ran deeper than just blood. There was a bond between people, a shared understanding that we are all in this together, whether we were related by blood or not. That's something I have come to miss so much. My mother used to tell me stories from her childhood that have stayed with me, etched in my memory, stories about the way her family took in people who weren't even related to them. If someone in their community was facing hard times, whether they had lost their job, couldn't put food on the table, or had nowhere to turn, my grandmother's door was always open. A person who had fallen on hard times would come into their home and stay until they could pick themselves back up. And it wasn't just one person here or there, it was a way of life. People looked out for each other. It wasn't unusual for strangers to become a part of the family, a part of the circle of care, because that's just what you did. You didn't turn your back. You didn't just look the other way. There was a shared responsibility to help those in need, even if they weren't family. This wasn't about charity or pity. It was about humanity, about doing what was right, about ensuring that no one was left alone in their suffering. It was a safety net that seems so rare now. It wasn't perfect, but it was something I deeply admired, something I long for today. But what happened to that world? What happened to that sense of connection? When I look around today, especially in the United States, I see a stark contrast to the way things used to be. I see isolation. I see disconnection. We've become a society so fixated on individualism, so caught up in our pursuits, that the bonds of community have withered away, almost beyond recognition. The idea of family sticking together, of having an unspoken agreement to care for one another, has largely disappeared. The very idea of caring for those who are aging, for those who can no longer care for themselves, has been cast aside as a burden. Instead of honor, it's become something that people feel they must avoid, as if it's an inconvenience to be dealt with only when necessary. It pains me to see this shift, to witness the deterioration of a value that, at one point, was considered fundamental. We have, in many ways, become a society of individuals, a collection of isolated souls who are too overwhelmed by their own lives to reach out and care for others. I can't help but wonder how this happened. And more importantly, I wonder how we can ever get back to the way things were. When I think back to when I was growing up in the 1950s and 60s, I can't recall ever hearing about older people who had nowhere to go, who had no family to care for them. Sure, people didn't live as long back then, and that's a reality we can't ignore. Life expectancy has drastically increased thanks to advancements in medicine and healthcare, and while that's certainly a blessing, it also brings with it a whole new set of challenges. With longer lives come longer periods of dependence, longer periods where people require help and care that they simply can't provide for themselves anymore. Back then, the elderly were usually surrounded by family, and they weren't left to suffer in solitude. They weren't cast aside in the way that we so often see today. But now, this situation has changed drastically. Now, studies show that a significant portion of the homeless population is made up of people over the age of 50. And when I hear that, my heart aches, because I remember a time when that wasn't the case. Older adults simply didn't end up homeless. Not like this. Sure, there were challenges, but the idea that someone who lived a long life could find themselves without a place to stay, without family to turn to, was almost unheard of. But today, it's an undeniable reality. As more and more elderly people outlive their families, as the safety nets that once existed are no longer there, they find themselves alone, vulnerable, and without a support system to fall back on. It's not just a matter of addiction or mental health issues, though those certainly play a role. It's also the devastating fact that, as people age, their resources deplete, their support systems fade away, and they are left to navigate a world that has forgotten how to care for its most vulnerable. And this isn't a minor problem, it's an epidemic. The number of older people who end up homeless or in dire situations is growing, and it's something we can't just ignore. It's not just an individual failure, it's a societal one. It's heartbreaking to think that these elderly souls, these people who once had their own families and their own lives, now find themselves discarded, forgotten by the very society that once prided itself on community and shared responsibility. I wish I could say this shift was something I could ignore, something that didn't bother me, but it does. Pains me deeply. It's a reflection of a larger issue, a failure of empathy, a failure of human connection. I wish we could go back to a time when family meant more than just the people who shared our last name. When it meant taking care of those around us, no matter who they were, no matter where they came from. I don't know how we lost that, but I do know that we need to find a way to reclaim it. Because if we don't, what does that say about who we are as a society? What kind of future are we building if we can't even take care of our own? So, what are we left with? It's a bitter truth that's slowly becoming more and more common. A growing number of people over 50 find themselves without financial resources, a reliable family structure, or even the comfort of close friends or partners. It's incredibly daunting to face this reality, and it's something we don't always want to acknowledge. Many of us, myself included, are living alone, and while that might feel okay as long as we remain healthy and self-sufficient, what happens when that changes? What happens when we lose that independence, when the physical and emotional toll of aging becomes too much to bear? That's when we're forced to confront something even more chilling: the truth of being an elder orphan. The concept itself is horrifying. The idea of growing older and having no one to care for us, no one to offer us the support we need. No family to check on us, no children to visit us, no spouse to lean on. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. For me, it's something I try to push out of my mind as much as I can. But deep down, I know the harsh reality of it. I try my best to care for myself, to be healthy, active, and independent. But sometimes, it feels like all I'm doing is hoping and praying that I won't end up in a situation where I'm spending the last years of my life in a long-term care facility. It's a thought that comes uninvited, like an unwanted guest I can't seem to shake. The very idea of being in a place where I'm no longer the one in control of my life, of my daily decisions, where I might lose my dignity and independence. It's deeply unsettling. And yet, as much as I don't want to think about it, that is the reality so many of us must face, especially as we get older and our circumstances shift. The statistics tell a bleak story, one that's too easy to ignore. Health and Human Services reports that a staggering 77% of people over 50 have not made any significant plans for their old age. That means no living will, no power of attorney, no advance directives, no plans in place for long-term care if we find ourselves needing help. It's a staggering figure, and it's not because people don't care. It's because we don't want to face it. We don't want to admit that the clock is ticking and that one day we will not be able to take care of ourselves the way we can today. It's uncomfortable to even think about it. I know I've avoided it, too. I tell myself, I'm okay now, I'm fine. I've still got time. But how much time do we have? The answer is something none of us truly knows, and that uncertainty only adds to the weight of this reality. One day, our health could change, and we may not be able to get up in the morning or walk without assistance. We may fall ill or find ourselves with a chronic condition, and that will mean needing help. In those moments, we may not have anyone to turn to. And the truth is, even with all the planning and preparation in the world, there's no guarantee we won't end up in a care facility. For many of us, a time may come when we need more than just a little assistance with daily tasks. Conditions like Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia could rob us of our ability to care for ourselves. And the thought of being dependent on strangers, on caregivers who don't know us, who don't understand our needs the way a loved one would, is terrifying. It's a reality that many of us will face, whether we're ready for it or not. We often push it aside, but it's there, lurking, as much a part of aging as the inevitable changes our bodies go through. So what can we do? How do we manage this fear, this uncertainty, this lack of control? Well, I believe the first thing we can do is focus on what we can control, and that's our health. If there's one thing we still have the power over, it's how we treat our bodies. And that's something that gives me a little peace of mind, a sense of agency, even when everything else feels beyond our reach. For me, it's been a slow, steady journey of taking better care of myself. I'm actively working on losing weight, and it's not easy. It's a battle against habits that have built up over the years, but every small victory matters. I walk regularly, trying to keep my heart strong, and I've learned to make exercise a regular part of my routine, even if it's just simple stretches or exercises suited for older adults. I watch what I eat, paying attention to what fuels my body and what doesn't. These things matter. They give me some sense of control over the future, something to hold on to in a world that seems increasingly uncertain. But even with all that, there are no guarantees. I can do everything right and take every step I can, but health is unpredictable. I could still face the reality of declining health, and that's something I have to accept, even if it terrifies me. That's why, even while I take care of my body, I still understand that I can't prepare for every eventuality. But I believe we owe it to ourselves to try. We owe it to ourselves to do what we can while we still have the ability to act, to make choices. Because at the end of the day, while we can't control everything, we can control how we approach this uncertain future. We can make decisions now that will impact us in ways we may not see for years to come, but which will make those years a little bit easier to bear. The question, though, is, will we take action now, or will we continue to push these uncomfortable thoughts aside until it's too late? As difficult as it is to think about, we must make plans for the inevitable. Whether it's ensuring our health stays as strong as possible or organizing our finances and legal affairs, we must take these steps now. Because the truth is, our time here is precious, and we don't know how much of it we have left. So let's do what we can now, not just for ourselves, but for our future peace of mind. Because even if we're walking alone through this life, we can still make it a little easier by taking control of the things that matter most. The National Institutes of Health highlights 3 major concerns that many elder orphans face: loneliness, chronic health conditions, and mental health struggles like depression and anxiety. These are issues that impact a vast number of older adults, and yet often remain hidden or unspoken. For many elderly people, these concerns are a daily burden, adding emotional, mental, and physical tolls that can sometimes feel overwhelming. Personally, loneliness isn't as big a problem for me, since I've always been somewhat of a loner. I've found solace in my own company over the years, but I can't help but feel a deep sense of compassion for those who live alone and feel the sting of isolation in their hearts. For those who face loneliness head-on, it can be a profoundly painful experience. The silence that fills the space around them, the absence of a familiar voice or the comfort of a warm embrace, can leave them feeling disconnected from the world. Living alone, especially when you're older, can be emotionally devastating. It's not just the physical act of being alone, it's the emotional weight of isolation, of feeling forgotten, and the creeping fear of being invisible to the world. I've seen firsthand how loneliness can take a toll on someone's mental and physical health. It can slowly chip away at your vitality, making even the simplest tasks feel exhausting. Social connections are not just a luxury, they are a fundamental need. Whether through family, friends, or even neighbors, these connections are vital. They offer more than just companionship, they offer a lifeline. Friendships, the kind that encourage laughter and share moments of joy and sorrow, can be the very thing that keeps someone going. Engaging with others, staying active in the community, or simply talking to someone on the phone can help stave off the darker sides of loneliness. It's important to reach out, even if it's just to check in on someone else. It can make all the difference in the world. Another significant concern for elder orphans is mental health. As we age, the likelihood of experiencing mental health issues like depression and anxiety increases, and this can have a ripple effect on physical health as well. Depression, for instance, can cause a person to withdraw from life, lose interest in the things they once loved, and even neglect their physical well-being. It's heartbreaking to witness someone trapped in the grip of depression, especially when they feel like there's no way out. Anxiety, too, can be a constant companion as we grow older. For me, anxiety has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. While it hasn't necessarily worsened with age, I've had to develop strategies to manage it. Breathing exercises, mindfulness practices, therapy, and finding ways to ground myself during stressful moments. It's something I live with, but I've learned to cope. For many others, however, depression and anxiety can become far more debilitating. It's not just about feeling sad or worried for a short time. It's a persistent feeling of heaviness that makes everything harder. The fear of losing one's independence, the worry about health or finances, the sense of loss as friends and family pass on, all these things can contribute to a decline in mental health. It's important, then, to address these issues head-on and find ways to cope before they spiral out of control. If you're facing the very real possibility of becoming an elder orphan, it can feel like an insurmountable challenge. But I firmly believe that despair is not the answer. No matter how dark or hopeless things may seem at times, I find that maintaining a sense of hope and holding on to a positive attitude is one of the most powerful tools we have. Life can throw unimaginable challenges our way, but that doesn't mean we have to succumb to them. It's easy to catastrophize. Imagine the worst-case scenario, like ending up in a nursing home with no one to visit, or being homeless at 90 with no one around to care for you. I've seen people let these kinds of thoughts take over their minds, and over time, it becomes like a prison. These fears, though, are often exaggerated by our minds. There's a concept in psychology called thought stopping, which has been a helpful tool for me. When I feel myself beginning to spiral into negative thinking, I consciously tell myself, stop, and redirect my thoughts to the present moment. It's empowering to remember that while we cannot control the future, we can control how we respond to the present. Instead of giving in to fear, focus on what you can do today. Perhaps it's something small, like taking care of your health, eating right, and staying active. Maybe it's as simple as reaching out to a friend or family member to check in. Or if you're physically able, it could mean going for a walk in the neighborhood, talking to a neighbor, or joining a group activity. You'd be surprised how powerful even the smallest actions can be in lifting your spirits and reinforcing your emotional resilience. Another practical step is preparing for the future. Creating a living will, looking into long-term care insurance, and considering other forms of healthcare are all ways to take control of your future well-being. It's not about expecting the worst, but rather ensuring that you're not caught unprepared when life inevitably changes. Planning is an act of self-care, an expression of self-respect. It's also important to stay connected to others, whether that's through calls, texts, or social media. Never underestimate the power of just sending a message or picking up the phone to check in with someone. Relationships, even those that seem distant, matter. They remind us that we are not alone. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. One thing that has truly made a difference for many people is getting a pet. Studies have shown that animals, especially dogs and cats, can significantly improve both mental and physical health. The companionship they offer is unmatched, and they provide a constant sense of comfort, especially in times of loneliness. I think of my elderly neighbor, who is in his 70s and struggling with serious health issues. He's been through so much, yet he remains remarkably positive. Why? Because of his dog. That furry friend has given him a reason to get up every day, to stay active, and to keep moving forward. There's something so profound about the bond between an elderly person and their pet. It's not just companionship, it's a renewed sense of purpose. This dog gives him the motivation to take care of himself, to stay strong, and to continue living with a sense of joy. Watching this relationship unfold has been a powerful reminder for me that no matter the challenges we face, we always have the power to find purpose and meaning in life, even in the smallest things. In conclusion, life as an elder orphan can seem daunting at times, but it is not without hope. Yes, the road is hard, and yes, the fears and uncertainties can feel overwhelming. But even in the face of these challenges, there is so much to hold on to: our relationships, our ability to plan for the future, and the simple joys of life, like a walk in the park, a conversation with a friend, or the unconditional love of a pet. Life doesn't end when we get older, it just changes. And with the right mindset, we can continue to grow, connect, and live in a way that brings fulfillment and meaning, no matter our age. As we wrap up today's discussion, I want to ask you, what have you learned so far? The challenges that elder orphans face can seem daunting, but we also have the power to take control of our lives, to plan for the future, and to cherish the relationships and moments that bring us joy. I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing you've learned today that you will bring into your life and practice moving forward? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this important conversation because your experiences and insights are valuable to all of us. If you like this video, Please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Together, we can navigate these challenges and continue living life with hope, purpose, and connection.